everyone, and welcome to The Download. Today I'm joined with the wonderful Merle Singer. Merle and I go back a long way, and I guarantee you that this particular episode is going to be a fascinating one for all of you to listen to, because Merle is one of the most fascinating individuals that I've ever met. So Merle, thank you for joining us. Welcome to The Download.
And thank you for that introduction. I hope that I'm not going to disappoint.
Merle, you have never disappointed. You know, there are times in your life where you work with people, you meet people, and they you know, everyone wants to have a profound impact, and I know that's one of your key things is being able to make a sincere difference to people,
Yeah.
And a difference in the world. And I know, and I've told you this, but I'm happy to share it with everybody that's listening, you know, and that's watching this, that you had an absolutely profound impact on me. I disliked you at the time for it, I must say, and I didn't dislike you, I disliked the feedback. And I think when you dislike feedback, that's often some of the best.
Okay.
And you said some really powerful words to me, which was, Ronnie, let yourself speak for yourself. And it was at a time where I was struggling in my career back at Dimension Data, and I was struggling to fit in, and I didn't quite know how to do things. And that was your advice. And I remember being the little animal that sat in your office for 2 hours saying, Merle, I just don't understand that statement. But we've moved on a long, long way since then, and it actually did have a profound impact. And now I do understand what let yourself speak for yourself is. And if any of you don't understand that, I'm welcome to have a chat with you about it. Set aside a couple of hours. But regardless of that, Merle, now it's been, you know, we worked together some 10 years ago or so. I think I started you in marketing. I know you've got a BA and a master's in psychology. You're a yoga instructor. You have a fascinating background that's not just psychology, but marketing. And now you've come back to psychology. You did a lot of people and culture stuff. Tell me, Merle, like, what makes Merle tick?
Yeah, that's... how long have we got?
Oh, we got as much time as it takes.
I think that when I think about it in a professional sense, I think you said about having impact. And for me, that is, as a leader, just generally, doesn't matter where you are, or as an individual contributor, how do you have impact and how do you influence? I think those are the two key things for me when you say what makes me tick. It's about extracting that from people and for finding that kind of magic internally as well.
And you found that magic inside of you through yoga?
You know, partially through yoga. I think yoga has been an incredible teacher, and I'll tell you why. I am, and you're not allowed to use these words in yoga, but I am very bad at yoga, despite being a practitioner for 15 years and a very, let's say, active participant. But my body doesn't allow me to do all the amazing gymnastics. So what yoga has taught me, is to be incredibly humble. When you're on the mat, you can do as much as you can do, no more. So there's something there about, I think the lesson for leadership is make the aspiration to be the best self rather than to be somebody else's self. I think that's a key piece for me. So,
and look at that, let yourself speak for yourself and be your best self.
Let yourself speak for yourself, and it will be hopefully one's best self.
Okay, so you are being your best self, and in doing so you've tried different things. You've had an interesting career.
Yeah.
You tried marketing.
I did for a long time.
Marketing. You nailed marketing.
I don't know about nailed marketing, but I did it for 15 years, actually very happily. So, yeah.
And it was the psychology behind the purchaser, if I'm not mistaken, that really excited you around marketing?
I think that actually it was different. It was less about the psychology behind the consumer or the client. We ran an event, a 1,000 people event, and for me, the power of that event was obviously talking to the client and understanding what the client wanted, but was the power of team, the power of collaboration, the power of a team that seemed to... There is and I can't quote it exactly, but there is a book on the All Blacks, and apologies to all those folk out there, but there is a fantastic book on the All Blacks about leaving the jumper better than you found it. And I think that event was everyone who participated wanted to leave it a little bit better for whoever was going to follow them. Mm-hmm. So that is really, when I look back on kind of legacy around marketing, that was the big one for me.
They were big events too.
Yeah.
You know, it's not easy to get all of those people together.
Yeah.
And now you sort of, since then you went and you did a global role.
Yes.
That would have been in education, I'm sure.
Yes.
Working in a big, ugly global company is always fun.
Yeah.
And even if they're not ugly, it's still always fun. And in your role, you were doing something at the time all around green and energy. And tell us a little bit more about that and about what your thoughts are in that space.
So I was fortunate enough to go to London to do it, which was wonderful. And it was at the time that the whole sustainability piece was coming into play. I also happened to be in London on the 15th of September when Lehman Brothers went bankrupt. And the last thing anybody thought about at that point was sustainability. But I think also being, an ex-South African, seeing water crises like Cape Town at the moment, we are in profound need of leadership around the fact of what do we do with climate change? How are we going to, save the species? There's a fantastic thing I watched recently on the third industrial revolution, that we've been a carbon economy, and actually what needs to happen next. He's a very, very interesting professor out of Wharton, and it appeals to the new phase of, I think, capitalism. So yeah, sustainability, even though I'm certainly not a scientist, I think we're all experiencing what that looks like.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about that third wave. I actually just attended a lunch with AI Global that was all around Industry 4.0.
Right.
And the digitization and how that's having an impact. And the impacts are significant.
Yeah.
No matter which way you look at it, and sustainability is but one of them.
Yeah.
So just shifting gears a little bit, right, coming into one of my mutual areas of passion for you, because I can equally tell you I am also very bad at yoga.
Yeah.
I can tell you that I really love events.
Yeah.
But the reality is that one of my core passions is leadership and culture and building, sustainable corporate cultures, and sustainable cultures that don't necessarily even have to just be corporate. Friendship groups, all those different circles and how those cultures work together is fascinating for me. And I know that you've just started a research project.
Yep.
And part of that sits around, the archetypal individual, and you also have a very strong bent around the feminine in the workplace, etc. Which I've done a podcast on previously around the feminine in the workplace. And I'm really keen to understand. Tell me about what's inspired this particular research project, and then I'd really love to dive into the different type archetypes.
Okay. Oh, that's a big piece. So what inspired me to do the research is really about looking at how do I work and how do I live and work with the things that I'm really passionate about as I continue to age. So these are some of the things certainly you do have to think about when you're at the youthful age that I'm at. And so it really has become a return, I suppose, to my psychology background, where I've been a woman in a mainly male environment, in a senior role. And I'm interested to see, given the digital disruption, given the next stage of the whole business side, is there a change in the feminine leadership qualities? And I'm going to be looking at both a combination, what I'm calling seasoned women, let's say senior women, and early stage millennials. And that will give me a look at both, from both perspectives. And my hypothesis isn't there's definitely a shift. I'm hoping there is, but I'd just like to see. It's just an exploration, I guess, at the moment, looking at narratives, archetypes. And so perhaps for the viewer, what is an archetype? And you may have heard it before, but what is it? It was a term that was coined by Carl Jung, who was a Swiss psychiatrist. And he spoke about themes and patterns that kept being repeated, and he began to call these things archetype. And so if we think of people that we know, you might talk about the alpha dog, the queen bee in the office, the alpha male, the alpha female, the young un, the politician. I mean, these are all archetypes. And I think traditionally We've seen many women really be ruler women or warriors. And I'm thinking, is there a shift in that to bring in much more of those feminine styles of leadership, which will impact, I think, men in a really positive way. And that's not to say that men don't have those feminine leadership qualities, but I'm interested in kind of exploring around women.
Okay.
Yeah, does that give you a...
No, it absolutely does, and I think we could probably explore a little bit more around the feminine there.
Yeah.
Insofar as what do you think? I understand you don't have an actual hypothesis where you determined the outcome yet.
Yeah.
But based on your own experience, and you weren't always a senior woman in the workplace, you also started as a junior.
Yeah.
And if you look at your own journey, how do you what did you find through your journey that you had to do? Because I must say, I did see a very strong Merle.
Yeah.
Right, and when Merle needed to be strong, she absolutely was strong, and you knew where you stood, and that was that. Yeah. And you didn't do it with what typically comes with that, which is, she's a bitch, which was absolutely not the case, because there was an absolute degree of softness with you as well. Yeah. So I'm keen to understand, from your own journey, the struggle of working, and a lot of our viewers are IT organisations, and they are predominantly male oriented. To the extent that I get a resume from a female, and I'm like, great, hire her. Can she do the job? My starting point is hire her. I'd love to have some more women in the team.
Yeah,
they're just not really so readily available, if you like. So tell us a little bit about your own journey and what you found that you had to do, and which archetypes you started in maybe and moved towards, because I don't think you would necessarily stick in an archetype, right?
No, and you can call on all of them, and you are much more than the themes and patterns that keep repeating. And when we begin to reflect on who's showing up in our work setting, you can have much more of a dialogue. And I think that that's part of the rise of mindfulness that we're seeing in corporations, is about getting that reflective time. So I think when I started, I was probably completely and utterly unconscious. And I was probably just a warrior and just trying desperately to hold on for dear life. I think one of the things that a lot of women suffer from, and this is difficult, I believe, for men to appreciate, is the imposter syndrome. And the imposter is actually an archetype where we believe we're not good enough, we're not smart enough, we're not talented enough, I can't do the job 100%, therefore I can't take it, I sabotage my opportunities. And I certainly think in the early part and also in the latter part of my career, I never really... And I don't like to use the word lean in, because I think there's lots of stuff around that. But I never felt the need to lean in, even though I wanted to. Maybe somewhere I might have wanted to. So I think sponsorship becomes a really important thing. And
I had executive sponsorship.
Yeah, and it's different from just. It could be in any shape or form. It's people who hold up mirrors, who push you, who challenge you to do more. And I certainly had bosses who tried to get me to do more. And for some reason, my archetype of imposter was much louder than it needed to be. And I think that as I've grown, I have all of those. I have ruler, I have warrior. I also have a very high magician, which is why I often talk in, the chemistry of things, or it's alchemical, or it's magic. I think I might have even used that word while we spoke. So you can see when the language people use, who's actually showing up, if that makes sense. So I've become more of who I am. That's a paradox, because you actually are who you are. But I feel more comfortable now in who I am, and that I don't feel apologetic perhaps for the stuff that doesn't make me fit in completely into a little box.
Which is, just listening to that, there's so many profound messages in what you were just talking about, from sponsorship, having somebody who's going to push you hard.
Yeah.
How did you feel at the time when you were young and you were fresh and you were being pushed hard? How did you sort of take that on?
Flee in the opposite direction. And I just pushed back, and I think that there's at some point, I think the sponsors don't want to feel like they're bullying you. So people eventually kind of gave up the ghost. But there are multiple opportunities to develop myself more and more that I played small. And I think I see that in a lot of women. They play small. They don't step into the ring. Yeah.
Right. And do you think that that's entirely women? I mean, I see that a lot with
No.
the current generation. I see a lot of that kind of bit of trepidation, but also ruler, want to, so don't necessarily, I can see that it is more prolific amongst women because
but it's not exclusive.
It's not
of course,
exclusive,
of course.
Right? Yeah.
And actually, a lot of the stuff, I mean, I have to speak about it from, I guess, my observation, and as a woman, that's my sense. But clearly, for men, this stuff is also happening. But I don't have as clear a view, I guess, on that.
Well, I think when you were doing people and culture in your
Yeah.
previous role, and I think was it you that came up with heads, hearts, and hands as the
Yes, we did. Well, actually, truth be known, it was certainly a joint effort, and a wonderful colleague of mine, or two colleagues of mine, actually crafted the concept, or used the concept to create heads, hearts, and hands, which is now a global piece, which is a very nice thing to know. Yeah.
Isn't it amazing how you can do something and then you just see how that just takes a life of its own and away it goes. So coming back to your research project, I'm fascinated.
Yes.
I'm fascinated. So
Excellent.
you have these, the application of the archetypes as well.
Yes.
And how they're sort of showing up, or how the people are showing up, and therefore how the archetypes show up as a result. How do you actually take from that in outside of a research project? If you're in a corporate environment, what could you actually do in a corporate environment to understand how those things happen, and importantly to communicate it with people amongst, because some of these concepts are difficult for some people to understand. They're not necessarily as steeped in psychology and culture, etc.
Yeah.
What do you do with that if you're a me? How do you actually embrace that idea?
So I think that if we take a step back from the individual and we just look at brands, and some brands that most people would know, Nike. There's a warrior brand. They don't even say anything. They never even talk about the shoes. It's just these warrior folk running, jumping, I don't know, doing, just do it with the whoosh, Everybody would know that. That's a warrior brand, and it's very, very, very clear. And I'm sure that there are other things, but that is kind of where they built this unbelievably powerful brand. So I think the conversation becomes, actually, who are you as a brand? What are your clients buying from you? Why are they buying from you? And then understanding if you putting your executive team together, what are the narratives of each individual? What do they bring? And I think that's part of understanding if we've got different thinkers. Because I think part of the digital disruption piece is we've got to think differently. So, this is just an opportunity to help you do that. This isn't the answer, but this is an opportunity to kind of go, okay, if 50% of my workforce or 40% or 30% is, a really important talent pool, who are they? Who's showing up? What do they want to be? And are we attracting them and retaining them and developing them according to that? And I think that breeds in the organization the ability to be innovative, thought-provoking, reflective, and really begin to understand, even from a client perspective. Imagine if you could understand, if you're dealing with men and women, but in the case of the study, if you're dealing with a client who's female, understanding the narrative there, then your language even in that sales process or in that service process becomes a very different experience.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's really interesting, because really solid salespeople can pick the opposite person, and they can change the way they speak to suit what the other person wants to hear it, or is going to be most receptive to it, etc.
Yep.
And they're typically classified as, geez, that's a really great salesperson. But the reality is, in life in general, to be able to acknowledge, and I think as well particularly in a management or leadership capacity, to acknowledge that every individual is different and they respond and react differently to the same words said differently, is something that a lot of people don't understand, and I think it's one of the biggest management transition issues. Is this is how I do things, and everybody should just accept and understand that, as opposed to changing yourself a little bit so that you're heard differently.
Yeah, and just craft. I mean, again, we remember stories. You know, that's the truth of it. You know, people can talk about their, you know, the stories they loved as a child, or the books that they've read that they loved. That was a fantastic story. You know, even now, and it's topical, given people like in our sporting analogy, you look at what's happened with the cricket team, and I've
got some sugar here, actually.
I look at that and I kind of go, that is such an interesting thing. It's like children. It's like it's the child archetype with the saboteur playing out. You kind of look at that and you go, what were you thinking? Well, certainly there was no adult in that supervising moment. But I think it's when we listen to it, when we listen to story, we remember that, we think of how we can engage with it differently, better, both at the individual level, at the team level, and at the corporation level. And I think that's a really important thing.
How many archetypes are there?
Supposedly we all have 12, but there are thousands of archetypes. You know, I said the cricketer, the sportsman. I mean, there's loads of them, loads and loads and loads.
And so how do you, I mean, there must be a set when Jung was doing this. He didn't come up with a book of thousands of archetypes, or did he?
Look, there are archetypes that used to be, like the serf in feudal times was an archetype. Unfortunately, the slave is still one of them. People find different names. So now we'll have the Iconoclast. May not have been.
What's that one?
The Iconoclast is somebody takes kind of a different position, like a different position to you.
So a challenger?
A challenger,
Okay.
yeah, with a challenger mindset. Yeah, there's not a book. I mean, I suppose there is somewhere, but there's not that I know of a master list of all the archetypes.
And so when you're doing your research project, are you narrowing those down to certain types of archetype?
I'm interested to hear whether there is thematic stuff of how women describe themselves.
Right.
Rather than me coming up with the things. So we know warrior, people kind of get, ruler, Amazonian. You use the word bitch. That's an archetype, yeah? So I'm just interested to see themes. What are the themes that are showing?
That is one of the most frustrating and annoying archetypes in the workplace for me. Right? The bitch concept. And not because of the bitch, but because even the concept of that annoys me.
Yes.
You know, because you can take a male and the male can have exactly the same words and exactly the same behaviour. The woman is a bitch and the male is just getting an outcome.
Yeah.
And that to me is a fundamental issue.
Here.
You know, I didn't say it to you just because you were a female, Merle, but it's something that it really does bother me.
Yeah.
All right, so
which is part of, I think, doing this research is also perhaps giving words and form and function to changing some of that narrative, so that we can talk about men and women equally in, you know, congratulatory and respectful ways.
Absolutely. And if I take your research project that you're going to do, okay, and I ask you, so what?
Yeah, that's
okay?
a good.
You're going to do this project, and what do you hope outside of your own research, which, you know, in academia, that's always something that's of value to the academic.
Yeah.
Outside of that, what is your hope in an ideal scenario that research, the impact that research will allow you to then continue to have, or in and of itself, standing on its own, will have?
So I'm hoping. I mean, this is now like. Can this be like a sales pitch?
Go for it, man.
I think this is part of building that level of expertise that I may have had in terms of my business that I've done to date, giving it a kind of a form to it. My hope is that it opens a door to work with cohorts of women, either vertically from senior to maybe sponsoring some of the early entry or early career women, to it being much more a horizontal thing across cohorts of women. The potential to talk to, executive leadership groups around and working with them and facilitating around, the different narratives. So I think it opens up a bunch of opportunities, I'm hoping, in terms of taking some of that information and some of that input and actually crafting, part of that being a business output at the end of it. Yeah.
And how long are you anticipating this to take?
How long is that piece of string? Well, you know how you set off like, and this is another archetype, the fool. You trip off and you think, oh, it'll be, really easy. And then you stumble at the first hurdle and you think, oh, this is going to take forever. I think somewhere between, long and longer.
Come on, Merle, I got to put a time frame on. There we go. 2 years.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah. But I'm hoping that I'll have bite-sized things that come out along the way. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's no doubt you already are.
Yeah.
Right. I think a lot of this is also validation for stuff that you've seen in your career and where you've worked, etc. And I want to pick up, because when I was talking about the profound messages earlier, I didn't pick up on one of them, and you just mentioned it again, which is that sponsorship, that mentoring, that that ability to provide, particularly the younger generation who are coming through. I mean, we have some graduates in our business, and it's fascinating to see the difference, even in a few years, that a few years makes between graduates and the mindset or the psyche that sits behind them. Yeah. And I just had a conversation with one today where I said, it's wonderful because you get taught what to do when you're at university. Yeah. You never get taught how to effectively do it in a workplace.
That's very good. I'll remember that. Yeah.
Right. And I think that's, I've often said that there has to be a significant training program for university students, TAFE students, school students, which is that it's not just transitioning into the workforce, but how to be in a corporate environment. Yeah. How do you send an email? What is okay for you to do that that's your friend, but this is your manager, or this is, and I see that there are degrees of what I would otherwise have called traditional respect that perhaps aren't necessarily translating anymore into the workplace today. And I think that sponsorship is not just to support women or men, younger men who are trying to learn what you and I have learned over the many years that we've been doing stuff. But I think it's very much about helping them with the how.
Yeah, I love that. I actually really love that. And that's also about then helping them craft their story in a better way. Because I think, what do they say? People pick up on who you are in 7 seconds. I don't know if I think that's the neuropsych on it. So for them to come back from stuff and to reclaim pieces is difficult, whereas if you start off early on and begin to help them shape that. I also think one of the things around sponsorship, we're quite good initially in those early stages of an intern or grad, but it's when they're in, it's almost like no man's land. They come out of that where there's been a lot of light and focus on them, and then they enter the space, the no man's land. And I just bumped into a young woman, just incredible young woman who I had done some work with a while back, who's moved out of a grad program into just, in flight in the large corporation. And there's something there about, that's when I think sponsorship becomes so important. So they've had all of that energy and focus. They kind of, by the time they're seasoned, they're good, they're back in focus. But there's this area of no man's land. And you're absolutely right. It's not just about women. It's women and men, and how we actually kind of support that. So, yeah.
All right, so let's just change topics now.
Okay.
Because that's all, I could sit here and talk to you for hours about that. Yeah. 3 books. Tell me a book even. That, and I know that you're, with your personality type, it's not necessarily sit and read a book and say that book is great. It's all different types of information flow from Merle. So share whichever type of information source that has an impact on you at the moment.
So the best book that I've read in the last little while is a book called Quiet. How introverts are changing or ruling the world with people that can't stop talking. It's by a woman called Susan Cain, and it is a must, not just for introverts, which I'm one, but for extroverts as well. It is just a brilliant, I think it was on it must have been on the New York Times bestseller. So that's my first pick. I think anything for people wanting to kind of explore what it means to bring in that authentic self, the vulnerable, authentic being is a woman called Brene Brown. She's got several books, and you can also watch TED Talks she's done. In fact, I think hers is the most watched TED Talk of all time on vulnerability, and which is an interesting thing when we think corporates is all about, coming to work, for the rough and tumble of it.
It's arguably a great thing for men to watch.
It's arguably just great thing
I
for
probably
anyone
should
to
watch that.
It is. It's incredible, and she is a great storyteller. So wonderful to watch, wonderful to read, and any other books that I can think of. No, I just say read bits and pieces. Don't just read a business book or read the New Yorker. Just read good writing. Actually, yeah.
Wonderful. All right, Merle. It's been so wonderful to have you here, but before I let you get off the couch, I want to know if you've got a good joke for us.
I definitely don't have. I am the most appalling joke teller. I can laugh at one, but I can't tell a joke.
There's nothing that's there?
Nothing. I'm my mother's daughter. No.
All right, Mel. Well, thank you very much. It's
Thanks, Ronnie.
Such a pleasure to have you here on the download with us.
Thank you.
I hope you've all enjoyed it. I did tell you that it'll be a fascinating conversation with Merle. It always is. So tune in to the next episode of the download. We've got a lot of really exciting people coming on very shortly, and hope you've enjoyed this particular episode.